The following is rated TV MALSV. It contains strong language, violence, and nudity. It is intended only for mature audiences.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to Darkroom. This is your host, Devious Dave Rose, and today is March 13th, 2019. On this episode, we're discussing the Ides of March. Beware the Ides of March, said the soothsayer to Julius Caesar. And we all know how that turned out. So I welcome everyone tonight to the Darkroom. There is so much to talk about. And as always, we always have an open phone line here for anyone that wishes to state their mind, especially at this special time of the month, the Ides of March. I remind everyone that the Vernal Equinox actually is next week. This is a time of change that many people are ignorant of or not paying attention to. But we understand that there is a change in energy and that many people may not see what is in store for them. So we do have to keep that into consideration when it comes to tonight's episode. Now, there's also the topic of some very interesting news. Now, things haven't been finalized as of yet, but I am working on some interesting new projects, and I will be revealing more information in the future, but this is something that will be a different channel altogether from this one, and there will be some increased discussion further away from politics and much more into the esoteric and occult. And I'm looking forward and quite excited to telling you about that sort of news in the future, but for the time being, that will have to remain a hidden card in my hand. Now, the Ides of March, as I was speaking to you about, is a special time in the month. The Romans actually did not utilize a numerical system when it came to their months, but used more like instances within their month that would allow them to tell time, whether it be at the beginning of the month, in the middle, as we are in right now, the Ides, or at the end. And it is a very important time of the year. There is a lot of new energy being flowed into the earth. We have the fact that the earth is on a cyclical system, and we experience a rebirth in nature every spring. And we are upon that point today. And before I continue, I just want to refer to Dave25 in the chat, who has just asked a question, so I'm just going to ask it here on the show. What are your thoughts on Alex Jones? Now, that is a very interesting and loaded question, but nonetheless, I'm more than willing to answer it for you. I did need to take a moment to take a swig of my drink, but now I'm able to answer what you had asked. And I've always said, with some dismay, that I do believe that Alex Jones is an agent provocateur. He is potentially part of a COINTELPRO program that essentially is to act as a, and there's a specific term that's used for this in intelligence circles, but a release valve, a steam valve, basically saying that if you provide a disenfranchised group of individuals with the idea that somebody else sort of believes what they're saying and they're going on camera acting out of control and crazy, that will alleviate their concern and won't have them act to hold the government responsible. Alex Jones has in the past not focused on certain topics that are extremely important. For example, the alien topic is something that he dismisses very quickly, does not want to discuss it. He's willing to discuss Israel, but he does not want to accept or acknowledge the inordinate amount of funding that they are provided and the active military actions that are made against the United States by Israeli intelligence for whatever reason. And those are just a few topics that he does not honestly discuss, and when confronted, he sort of dismisses. Is he as crazy as some people think he is? I don't think so, because there's a lot of truth in what he says. But when you're acting as a disinformation agent, you will be providing a lot of truth while you do put out a false narrative to sort of lead people off the trail. I do like your second question there, Dave25. Do you think he's the Bill Hicks guy? Now, I'm an open-minded individual. No matter how preposterous it might sound, I'm more than open to humoring any idea. Just because, A, if we truly do live in a multiverse system, everything's possible. Literally. I mean, I don't believe in a flat earth, but in a multiverse universe, it exists. That's just the mathematics behind it. That's a dispassionate sort of analysis of it. Regarding this, though, I do find it an extremely laughable proposition. I do not believe whatsoever that Bill Hicks is Alex Jones. Are there similarities between them? Yeah, I guess. I mean, I've noticed similarities between other people. Is there enough evidence to point towards that somehow Bill Hicks decided to assume Alex Jones' sort of identity? I don't believe so. I do believe Bill Hicks is dead. And more importantly, and I talked about this actually, I believe, on a previous episode, but if you were to truly fake your death, now let's really go through this, okay? Let's assume that you have enough money banked that you can disappear, okay? But you want to fake your death. You might have surgery done on you. You might change your habits. You might find a different place to live. But you're not going to put yourself in the spotlight and have attention put on you when you could expose the lie that you initially set up. So some people say, for example, Biggie Smalls or Tupac Shakur are fake their deaths and basically are living somewhere off the grid. Well, I would find more reason to believe that than I would believe that Bill Hicks is Alex Jones. Because if you were to truly fake your death, you're going to want to not expose yourself to the spotlight whatsoever. So it's a funny, in my opinion, preposterous accusation. I see where it's coming from, but I don't agree with it, and I will call it out and sort of dissect where it would be incorrect. But it's an interesting question. Many people ask it, and there's no fault in you doing so because there are certain similarities that need to be addressed. I just don't think that they're the same guy. And I do apologize for that long-winded response. But I will again encourage you to call in here tonight. After all, the Ides of March, this is the forum. We must encourage all senators to join in to the discussion so that I, the Caesar, have an opportunity to be stricken by a knife to the back. After all, et tu, Brute? And this again is all relating back to the Ides of March. So, we've had an awesome and crazy week. The politics situation is going nuts. The political world situation is also off the handle. And here we are as humans, basically trying to live through it. Oh, and it's also tax season soon. After all, you know, what says liberty and freedom than having to pay an organization money that you've earned just for the fact that you exist? Because I'm sure that you can agree, taxation is theft. If we take a look back into perhaps prior to 1913, when the Bank Act, and I can't remember the exact full name of that bill, was pushed through by Woodrow Wilson, income tax was not a big deal. And the country still survived and was able to fund just about everything. But, and America had an extensive navy at that point, which was quite costly. And colonies throughout the rest of the world, like the Philippines or Panama and other places. And yet, 1913 comes around, and look at that. We're going to tax you on everything. And the Federal Reserve comes into power, and they start to work with organizations that, for example, are located in Switzerland, or perhaps the City of London. And slowly but surely, the standard is moved away from the gold system, which had kept the country stable. And by 1933, Roosevelt essentially took the American system off the gold standard, and all remaining gold back in, I think, 1976 was then completely removed from the hands of private citizens by Richard Nixon. And this is all, again, precipitated and based on the orders and interests of these international banking systems. It's just paper with ink on it. It doesn't even have gold backing anymore. That's what people used to back their money on. Now it's worthless. And if you take a look at what's happening in Venezuela, unfortunately, you'll see the result of that. People are essentially just throwing their money on the street. It has no value anymore. It basically doesn't serve any purpose because things have just exploded with their hyperinflation that you can't buy anything. And yet, we have individuals like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez who are pushing socialist policies just like Venezuela, either not understanding or perhaps fully understanding where it will lead. And socialism and communism has never been successful. Never accept somebody trying to tell you, oh, it was never implemented properly. They just didn't know what they were doing. So over 100 years of attempting to implement socialism or communism, and they still can't get it right, whether it be with Soviet Russia, North Korea, Congo, the list goes on. No, there's no excuse. The fact is quite clear. Communism, socialism never works. Ever. There's no way that you can make it work unless it is through repression. Capitalism, despite its problems, does not encounter that same situation. And yet we live in a world where people ignore this. They want to feel good. So if a political candidate makes them feel good by the way that they talk to them, saying that the world will be a better place if we just tax the rich 100%, despite the fact that trickle-down economics actually does work, despite these idiots that claim that it doesn't. Now, the hidden hand of economics, of anyone that understands the terms that are used in that system, is influenced by a fiat money system. If true capitalism was allowed to operate, you would see essentially an explosion of wealth and growth for everyone, whether it be low income, middle income, high income. Individuals that own companies, that have resources and money, and hire other individuals to work with their companies, they're not these evil individuals that the media tries to claim them to be. They're actually adding to the economy. You take their ability away to run a company, you're just taking away from the economy. Now, despite the fact that the Republican Party has major problems, and most of them aren't even Republican to begin with, the essence of republicanism is to allow an individual to do their own thing because it benefits the republic. And when you allow an individual to run a company without government interference, without any sort of regulations that really are just set up to keep bureaucracies rich through fees, they're not really made to protect the environment. Just look at the environmental department. I can't remember what they're called right now, but massive amounts of pollution have gone into American rivers. And nothing has been done about it because these organizations really don't care. They're just part of the bureaucracy. They're there to take money. So we have to understand that there is a difference between what we're told in regards to what could work as opposed to what wouldn't. I'm going back to the capitalism aspect where uninhibited, without any interference, you get the growth that you saw with America after the Civil War. it became a powerhouse and matched the power of the British Empire. After the wars and stuff, obviously, the climate changed. But until that point, America came from a point where they had faced a revolutionary war to facing a civil war and then trying to match an industrial power like Great Britain or France, and they came out on top. And that, I think, again, speaks a lot to the spirit of the American dream and the American identity. So I think that has a lot to do with what we're discussing tonight. Now, I'm just going to take a moment here to have a drink. I've been on a little bit of a tirade, and I need a little bit of some liquids to refurbish myself. Now, I guess it's perhaps a slow night for some people, or perhaps people have plans tonight because we don't have too many viewers here tonight, as well as the fact that we're not getting too many calls at all. But that's perfectly fine. I'm just here to speak my mind, giving the opportunity for you to speak yours, and yeah, maybe I can learn something tonight. I'm always open for it. So let me just go through my list here of topics. There's always a lot of topics to discuss. Here's something that we can discuss right now, is that there is an individual who is trying to run for political office in the United States, and they're somebody that you should be aware of. His name is Andrew Yang, and he is proposing some ideas that, if you examine them properly, you'll understand that all he's trying to do is just garner votes. And it's a little bit unfortunate and concerning because, as we saw with Bernie Sanders, for example, if you provide somebody with a lie that's just sweet enough for them to swallow, they're going to do so. And you saw that with Bernie Sanders. You saw that with Hillary Clinton. You've seen it even with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They don't really care about the facts. All they care about really is just to make you feel good, to make you feel that they've got your back. And a lot of politicians do this. I mean, we can't deny that. But more importantly is that at least some of them can hide it better than others. Because when you see a politician who says this sort of idiocy and can easily be proven wrong, it's an insult to you, I would think. I mean, if you're going to play me, at least make an effort for it, try to back your stuff up so at least it's more difficult for me to figure out that you're lying. But Andrew Yang is he's a total shill. And it's, I think, something that really isn't being discussed too much at the moment. Perhaps maybe he's just a political blip on the radar and will disappear. Because we have a lot of clowns that are showing up for the 2020 election. The U.S. Democrat Party is just basically falling apart with with the way that they're infighting, and all these individuals just attacking each other despite the fact that they're part of the same party. So Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, Kamala Harris, I think I said Bernie Sanders. You've got all these individuals, and there's more, that are just attacking each other. And it's hilarious because you would think that if they were so unified in trying to remove Trump with this supposed talk about impeachment, although now Nancy Pelosi is saying that there's no point in impeaching him. Interesting. It makes you realize that the Democrat Party really is in in the worst shape that they've ever been. And I would actually kind of think it would be funny if Trump, for example, or the Republican Party had somehow planted people into the Democrats just to screw them over even more. Because right now it literally is like a Three Stooges episode where everyone is just fighting each other and making these blunders and stuff. And it's hilarious because they're almost handing Donald Trump his sort of win. Now, we got Little D in the chat, and he says, I think sorry, apologize. Sorry to assume your gender, after all. YouTube, social media, can't trigger anybody. Little D says, is Brexit the start of a one world government? Well, I'm glad that you bring that up, because if you're aware, the whole European Union experiment actually started back in the 50s. As soon as World War II was over, they started this sort of economic trade region. They've used so many different terms. So the term that I'm using right now, hasn't probably been used in decades. But the bottom line is they designated the European continent as being a place where they would be able to institute the beginnings of a one world government, or at least how can I put this? A state, almost, to allow for that enforcement. Look at the amount of money and power that under the European Union that is now can control. So what happened in the 50s and 40s and 50s by unifying all these countries under an economic agreement merged into the European Union, and it got the euro as an attempt to try to start their own currency and to begin the push towards a unification of all currencies. Because there's total truth in what you're saying. There is a push with these sorts of initiatives to create a one world government. Many people may not know, although I'm starting to think that many people that are watching this show probably do know, that in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was a push and agreements made, treaties signed, to allow what's called the Amero, a unified currency between Canada, the United States, and Mexico. The plan essentially was, if you look at the white documents, they're there, the white papers, it states that what they wanted to try to eventually do was to start the Amero North American currency, the euro, and then an Asian, a sort of pan-Asian currency, which I never figured out what name they decided on. But by unifying those markets and then by unifying the economies, then you have unified currencies. And then when whatever manufactured economic downfall happens, you say, well, instead of three currencies, let's have one currency. And as you know, with one currency comes one world government. So the Brexit action, I don't think is a start of a one world government. I believe it's trying to stop that one world government, or at least it's a country that recognizes its sovereignty and realizes it cannot be part of this dystopian future that it wants to create. May, I don't remember her first name. Fat cunt piece of shit fuck. She is a traitor. She sold out Great Britain and the United Kingdom for her rulers there in Brussels and in Germany. She never wanted a Brexit in the first place. She tricked the people into voting for her so that they thought that she was going to help them out. Britain, England, the United Kingdom, unified, is extremely powerful. They've got resources, and they've got expertise, and they've got a capable and educated population. The records show that if they were to leave under their own terms, it would cause the downfall and collapse, economic collapse of the European Union, just for them alone, despite the fact that essentially Germany is the lead powerhouse of the EU and essentially is one of the main governments and countries that props up economically that system. But if Britain was to pull out, England, it would just collapse the system. That goes to show how much potential they have. And yet they get screwed over by what May does, and by what Merkel does, and by what... there's all these guys. I can't remember his name. I don't know, like... There's so much information that I could put out, and it would just burn your ears out from how boring it might sound. But there are literally thousands of people that want to see the downfall of Europe, and they are part of the European Union Council that aren't elected. They represent the people that never elected them in the first place. I think that should say a lot, especially to countries that don't fall under that system and are being offered the opportunity to join that sort of tyranny. Never give up your rights, especially when it comes to things that you consider idealistic, like globalism. It might sound good on paper, but we know where it's going to end. And I do have to thank Little D, because that was a great example on a microcosm to explain what can happen on the entire planet on a macrocosm. I will say, I am a little surprised tonight that I'm not getting as many calls as I expected, but I had promised to go live. I'd indicated on some recent shows that I had wanted to go live last week, Thursday. I was extremely tired and exhausted. I had to pull that off and cancel that. And then on Friday, I was planning the same thing, and I canceled again because I was extremely tired. And then Saturday came around, and I had to do the same thing. And to be honest, I don't like to not, do shows when I say I will, but I think that also speaks to the fact that I really did want to run some shows. I did want to speak about some current events and just interact, and I would like to be more consistent if I could, but for the time being, this is what you're going to get. But that being said, I still thought it was necessary for me to go live tonight, despite also being tired, just to live up to what I had promised and at least get these videos out. So that's some information for you. So let's see here. We have been going on for about 33 minutes. I don't think that's too bad, considering my physical state and so forth. But let's see if I can find anything more in my news here. Can be discussed. I did discuss the Vernal Equinox just briefly, but we do have those cardinal points in our transit through the stars, and they do have a lot of power on this planet. And more importantly, there are people that give them even more power. We have individuals that actually conduct ritualistic sacrifices on these dates, whether it be an equinox or a solstice. And these individuals essentially think that they derive their power from the sacrificing of an individual. This is something that is very rampant, to be quite honest, in this world. And many people are trying to scramble to cover up their involvements in these sorts of things. Now, we've got little D again in the chat saying, how can I support the show? I love this shit. Don't want it to end. Just keep watching. Keep adding comments. Give it a thumbs up or thumbs down. It's all good. But I don't air any commercials on these videos, on my channel. There's no point. The payment for me is basically sharing the information. If somebody can make use of it, then that's all the payment I need. There's no need to show any support other than to show up, to listen, and to provide your input. I've always said I'm not perfect and I don't know everything, and in fact, I'm like a sponge. I like to absorb information, and whenever I get an opportunity to learn from others, unlike other people, I don't take offense from them. I'm actually totally up for it. And I might be ignorant on certain topics, but I'm more than willing to work towards fixing that. So I don't take offense about these sorts of things, and I'm always interested in interacting, no matter how much you might disagree with me, because there might always be an opportunity to learn. And that's always my endpoint, is because learning leads to truth. And to me, truth is paramount. It must always be pursued, and it doesn't matter where it leads us, because there's many times, and this scares a lot of people. I can totally accept it, but it scares a lot of people to accept the fact, or to at least acknowledge, that the truth is going to take you to some very dark and dirty places. You have to accept the fact that sometimes you have to look into the darkness. You have to look into the abyss. You have to accept the fact that the truth isn't always sunshine and rainbows. And the sooner that we can gain that bravery to approach those sorts of subjects, the sooner that we can overcome them and make not only ourselves better, but the people around us better. Now, let's see here. I can't keep, any sort of, what's the term? God damn it, my brain's not working. Whatever, I gotta keep talking. The whole radio thing is like, you can't have dead air. I just gotta keep talking. I don't know, I make it enjoyable for you too, but there's just so many stories I could cover, for example. But I want to make it entertaining for you too. I mean, you're taking time to listen to me, and despite the fact that our world is can be depressing, from time to time, I also think that we got to be able to laugh at it. We're presented with these opportunities in life that we could either suffer from them, or we can learn from them and just supersede them. Like, we are who we are, but we are who we are for the fact that we choose what we do with ourselves. So if we choose to stay, depressed or obsessed or preoccupied or distracted or whatever, rather than trying to stay true to ourselves, trying to stay focused on what makes us happy, then, that's a problem that we have to recognize in ourselves. It's not something that we can expect others to help us out with. But that being said, though, when you have an open mind to consider what other people do have to say, you do learn a lot, not only about them, but you do learn a lot about others. About yourself, I should say. Because it can be a challenge sometimes to see your own failings. And it does sometimes take individuals to point those out to you. But I do kind of feel that we are in a state right now in the world where if you were to try to help somebody out by pointing out these sorts of things, you're going to get shit on and you're going to be criticized as some sort of hater when your entire intention was really just to help somebody out. Again, I do apologize for the little bit of dead air there. I had to have a drink. Wasn't so cognizant in the past that when I go on my little filibuster tirades that I need to stay hydrated. Continue to drink some liquids to ensure that I can speak without my mouth getting all dry. But let's see what else. I do apologize to struggle today for getting some of the topics up here. It's been a long week, and fuck, it's only Wednesday. If you follow some of the stuff that I do, you'll notice that last night I was on a show called The Drama Zone. No, sorry, it was called Afternoon Delight, and it was on the Scott McKinnon reality shift channel. And I was up till about 2:30 in the morning, and even after this hour change, I was quite taken aback as to how much it affected me. So after last night's episode, I was extremely tired. So I do apologize for not being at 100% here. I would even love if someone could call in and debate me, but to be honest, I'm not sure if I would be able to provide a proper fight, or proper response at least, just for the fact that I am physically exhausted. Okay, so a lot of news in space. We've got SpaceX planning their next rocket, which they say is going to be entirely made out of stainless steel, which kind of is a throwback back to the 1950s. If you see their graphics, it's, like looking into the past. You have a rocket that literally looks like it's out of a comic book. But it also makes you wonder as to why they're going back to old technology when apparently the current stuff worked perfectly fine. So it's very interesting, especially when you start to look into the technology that's being used and you start to realize that this technology has existed for a while, and then realize that it hasn't been used in many cases, but you don't really know why. I mean, why wasn't NASA, for example, utilizing the same technology? Now, do I think that Elon Musk is going to reach the moon? I don't know, to be quite honest. I have my doubts. I think we're going to see what we saw before with his little photo shoot with the car, where essentially it was entirely faked. So, will he reach the moon? That's debatable, but he's talking about going to Mars. We're not there. We're not capable of doing that with the technology that we're being told that is available. Is there technology that exists that would allow us to do this? I personally think there is. I've seen evidence there is, and I've also seen the patents. Is it what we're being presented with? Absolutely not. So, The bigger question is who benefits? We have people like Elon Musk telling us that we're going to get to Mars using his technology. But we know that technology exists that could get us there half the time that would take traditional chemical rockets, not expose the crew to the effects of low gravity for such a long time, and essentially be more efficient. And yet we're getting only the story that NASA tells us. So we know it's possible to get there more efficiently, but we're being told that NASA's story is the correct one. There's a lot to question. And the bottom line is you've got to question the ultimate question, which is who benefits? Who's making all these capsules, right? Who's making all this money from these projects they end up delaying, and rather than being penalized, the government gives them more money? What's the company, or what are the companies that are essentially saying their technology exists and allows us to reach these far off places, and yet now we're being told it's going to take to what, maybe 2021 or afterwards for us to just send an unmanned capsule around the moon? We did this in 1968. There's much more to this story. There's much more to what we're being shown as opposed to what exists in the background. And I've always said this. NASA is basically like the movie that's being projected onto a screen. But behind the projector is the actual story, is the actual truth as to what's going on. And we can analyze so many different things with NASA alone that proves this. Whether it be spacewalks that are totally proven fake, to videos of the International Space Station that show water bubbles, for example, or a Earth that is literally 10 feet away. Yeah, sounds strange, absolutely. You watch the videos and you have to make up your own mind, but it's there. It's there for you to analyze. It's there for you to see. That's why I never say don't believe anything that I say. Look into it yourself. Decide for yourself. And there's overwhelming evidence that a lot of the footage that we get when it comes to space encounters has been totally, entirely faked. Hoaxed. Entirely. No questions about it. When you see bubbles coming out of the visor of a spacewalker, you know that that video was not filmed in low Earth orbit. When you see an astronaut who is flipping around supposedly in the International Space Station and their pants have a slight slant where you have an astronaut beside them that grabs supposedly an area that has nothing there, that's just empty space, and slows them down. And then you realize that that's a harness. You see videos where astronauts are in front of what could be considered a green screen, a pattern essentially set up to allow for the transposition of images behind it. And you've got proof of that. You've got proof of astronauts with virtual reality items in front of them. Now, they're not actually in front of them, but they're monitoring a screen in front of them that shows them where it is. And they're able to easily manipulate these things. Now, what's amazing is that these videos are out there on the internet. And there's so many of them. You can actually see where the manipulation is done. Now, whether that be because they're sloppy, whether it because maybe because they don't care. That's up to speculation. But these videos exist, and all you have to do is check them out. So we, again, are presented with the fact that we have two different instances that can both be proven true. There's something in orbit that fits the shape and description of the International Space Station, and you can monitor it from Earth as it travels over the sky. But you also have these videos that do not fit the narrative that we're being told. Now, people will ask, well, what's the true story? Where's the truth? It's somewhere in between. There's a reason why they think it's necessary for them to fake the footage on the International Space Station. What's so dangerous of them filming that in the International Space Station? Because we've gotten other videos that are clearly on the International Space Station. So why is it that certain scenes need to be manipulated and sold to the public? I don't know, to be quite honest. But I do know that there's something there. There's a reason why certain things are shown, certain things aren't. And even when you've got a live feed of the exterior of the International Space Station, when you start to see these little anomalies, little glowing lights, discs, saucers, boom, feed get cut. Oh, sorry, technical difficulties. But it all goes on film. It's been seen that these objects encountered the space station just prior for the feed to be cut. Now, if they truly lived up to their example, they would continue the feed, but they've got a narrative to control. So they cut the feed, never talk about UFOs, and just ignore what they clearly proved exist. And I remind you again that you can always call in to the show. You can reach me on Skype at Devious Dave Rose. I'm always interested in hearing your views, even if you disagree with me. So, moving on from the space talk, let's also talk about how the oceans are not as explored as they could be. Now, there is a lot of talk about underwater, unidentified sea objects, I believe they're called submerged objects. Sorry, it's a relatively new term, but nonetheless, essentially, just like UFOs, you have objects that are observed going into the oceans and into the deep ocean. Recently, actually, and I can't remember who it was, actually revealed a little more truth than they should have and got ridiculed for it. Off the coast of San Francisco, there does appear to be an underwater base for these objects. And if you take a look at Google Earth, you can actually see where this supposed base exists and where the entrance is. It's actually quite incredible because it's totally artificial from what you see. You can totally notice that the structure itself around the entrance is not natural. And this is just one example. There are literally thousands of sites around the world where, even known to tourists, Gulf Breeze, for example, in Florida, is one place where tourists now flock because you've got these UFOs that you film, you watch on the coast. They dive into the water, and they go deep down, and you essentially see them do that. And tourists now flock to these locations to witness these sorts of things. And it's all over the world where you have these instances of unidentified objects of any sort that are going underwater. And if you take if you really start to think of it, 70% of the planet is covered by ocean. You have extremely deep areas. Chances are, well, actually, no chances. If, let's say, you take all water off the planet, okay? Everything below the current water level, like, say, mountain-wise, is much higher than anything right now. So you would find mountains that are higher, taller than Mount Everest. So we're talking an extreme level of depth. Totally dark, mostly, and so much that's not known. Now, if we're going to start to dig into the esoteric, there was a movie back in the 80s called The Abyss. Now, I think we've got a viewer in the chat there. Sorry, I don't know why I was going to say Alex Jones. Joe Cronin, who I'm sure remembers this movie as well, because it was a great movie. It was called The Abyss. And that talked about the potential for life at these depths. And we also have to understand that Hollywood really is part of Project Mockingbird. So they really are just dropping hints to the reality of what exists in this world. Now, there's another movie, actually, I just remembered, called Cocoon. And that also, strangely, was located in Florida. And there was essentially an alien that was found in a cocoon. And there's a lot of... It's a long story and stuff, but it's a good movie. But another part of predictive programming, part of Project Mockingbird. Advise the audience, advise the people what you're doing, but in a way that it looks like a joke, so that the spell casting allows them to carry on and gain from your acceptance to their spell. Now, that might sound a little odd, but when you start to take a look, and this is what they believe, when you start to take a look at how these elites operate, they warn you of what they're planning to do, but they do it in a way that looks like a joke, so that they've already told you what they planned, you didn't object, and therefore the spell is complete, and they now have gained that power. That really is the method of magic with a K on how they operate. Now, that might sound odd to some people, but magic is not an illusion. It's not like playing cards. There is the ability to manipulate energy, and that essentially is magic. Now, whether it be feng shui, which is a form of geomancy to organize your environment to provide positive energy for you, or it is Luciferian Satanism, which requires the utilization of a human sacrifice to feed upon adrenochrome and the psychic energy off a sacrifice. Those are two different sides of essentially what is magic. Strange, odd, perhaps things that you might not normally discuss or might even dismiss. And even if it wasn't for me to bring it out to you, there are other people that believe this. There are people in power that believe this. And those are the people that you should be concerned with. Now I'm going back to the chat here to see if anybody would like to call in, that would actually help me out here, because I would like to take a moment to have a drink and have a smoke and relax while maybe somebody else would give me some information. But tonight seems to be a lonely night. Poor me. We do have 4 people watching, so that's cool too. And I do appreciate those that are viewing. Chances are that includes me, so that probably means there's only 3 people watching. But nonetheless, hey, thanks for spending Wednesday night with me. You know, stuff to be talked about. Always open to discuss these sorts of things. And I'm always open to learning. Don't say I'm always right. And there's always so much more to learn. So if someone can educate me on things I don't know, I will be in your gratitude. So we've been going for about an hour or so. I don't think that's too bad. I mean, considering my my state with my my energy level, if you want to call it that. I think things have done fairly well. You know, I wanted to come out and not only acknowledge the Ides of March, because timing, I think, is extremely important. You might not believe, and I'm not saying necessarily to everyone out there. What I'm saying is that it must be understood that just because you don't believe something doesn't mean that others don't believe it. And we know that we're ruled by a certain elite that have certain beliefs that we do not share. Certain extreme beliefs that, when you start to take a look at them, are quite ugly. So, actually, I lost my train of thought. I do apologize. But yeah, there's different trains of thought that we need to consider. There's individuals that try to rule over us, that believe certain things, but if we don't understand what they believe, we'll never understand how to overcome their attempt to control us. So certain politicians, for example, might have certain beliefs, and we might dismiss them and say, oh, they're just kooky, or they're part of some cult. But there's a lot more truth to that. For example, damn, I can't remember the politician's name, but he's a Mormon. Now, if you start to take a look into Mormonism, if anything, that's one of the newest cults out there. I mean, it's amazing if you really start to analyze what Mormonism is all about. It really is a sort of New Age cult. And yeah, some people might get mad at that, but you can't, well, I can't say you can't, because I think it was Adam Smith, the founder of Mormonism, was an illiterate. And I was going to say, you can't be an illiterate and found a religion. But we've got him, and we've got Muhammad of the Islamic beliefs that did the exact same thing. So perhaps maybe that's just the requirement, that you're totally ignorant in even writing or speaking. And it's just easier to create a control system based on literally medieval, not even medieval, but they're savage beliefs. I mean, they're primitive, superstitious beliefs. And that does have a lot to do with what's been transposed on religion. Now, religion, in my opinion, does have its value, but in any religion that you see today, chances are you've got these sorts of items that have been stapled upon it, where it requires a religious dogma to follow. It ignores certain facts that again, disprove the religion from having any veracity. So it's I think it is totally acceptable to criticize religion, but you also have to recognize that some religions are better than others, and that there's also a contextual aspect of time and an era when certain rules were made up because it was for the benefit of the tribe, but in a day and age like today, they just don't apply. But then again, all we have to do is look for an example like, say, stoning homosexuals and or executing homosexuals for being homosexual. Now, you're not finding that in Judaism or Christianity or Buddhism or Sikhism, but you are finding it in Islam. So that's something I believe that should be addressed. But then again, in Judaism, you have the custom of essentially slicing off the foreskin of a newborn child without their consent and claiming it as being a cultural requirement, when perhaps in this day and age, unlike in those times where dirt could lead to infection, perhaps in this day and age it's no longer necessary. So religion does need to be criticized, in my opinion. It also provides a lot of benefit to humanity, but that's when you dig past the dogma and go straight to the spirituality. But when you have man claiming knowledge over the divine, that's when you get these dogmatic rules that are posted on top of everything, where it says you've got to pray X amount of times a day. You got to dress this way. You got to bow this way. You've got to worship this way. You've got to pay this way. That's when you realize that that influence is of man and not of the divine that you are trying to worship. So I think it's extremely important that people understand that despite the benefits that a religion has, we also have to realize that humans have had interactions with that and have put their own beliefs upon it, causing either misinterpretations or complications due to the fact that we are fallen as humans and that we are essentially not perfect. So I think it's extremely pertinent when it comes to considering the potential benefits of religion versus the downfalls of religion. I'm just going to take another drink here, a drinky poo. All right. Oh yeah, I think we've talked about quite a lot actually on this episode. We've haven't been consistent on one particular topic, but I think we covered a lot. And I mean, I do enjoy jumping all over the place, but I also think about the audience listening and do try to put myself in their mindset, and perhaps maybe I do want to stick to one topic, but I do need your input. I mean, whether it be comments in the chat or even calls on the show. But I do want to try to cover as many topics as I can, or at least try to be consistent on particular topics. And again, this is really just for fun. I mean, I want to share the information that I have. I don't expect any praise or benefit from it. Again, somebody like Little D, I do appreciate what you were talking about in regards to supporting the show and stuff, but it's comments like that just make me want to continue to just do this. I'm not getting any financial benefit from it, but anything I can do to make the world a better place, or at least to make people think. I'm not saying I'm right, but if I can make people think, even if it is to say, no, I just realized, Dave, you're wrong, and here's the reason why, I accomplished something. And in this world of chaos, if we can add just a little bit, just to make the world a better place, I think it's worth it. So, just want to say that regardless of what we've had here on the show tonight, with the minimal interaction, I still think it was extremely productive. Got to talk about a lot of topics. Got to clarify a few myself. And, yeah, I thought it was an enjoyable episode. I mean, I'm not going to keep you guys on here longer and just struggle to to speak when I think I've gone through a lot, and honestly understand that some people perhaps are busy tonight. But I thought it was good. That was good fun. An hour and 10 minutes. Got to talk about it for a bit. And I will definitely be coming up in the future with some future Darkroom episodes. I have a few more topics I want to discuss just exclusively on their own episode. And there's still more news, as I mentioned earlier, in regards to that future project, which once I finalize some final details, I hope to give you more information on. So this is Devious Dave Rose, thanking you for joining us here tonight on the Darkroom, where the hidden becomes known. Tune in next time when we're going to talk about anything to our heart's desire. You have yourself a good night, and keep your eyes to the sky.